Welcome to the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. We're staging an entire day of programs and videos to celebrate the International Day of the Midwife. My name's Neil Stewart. I'm the editorial director of the Maternity and Midwifery Forum, and I'm joined by a whole series of characters from around the country who are part of our advisory panel. If you want to ask questions, fire them in online and I'll pass them up. But what we're going to do is we're going to review what we've been hearing today. I'm joined by Dianne Garland, who is, where are you, Dianne? You can shout out your locality.
Kent, in the UK.
Kent. Judy, where are you?
Well, I'm currently involved there, but I do work down in Essex still, and that's proved interesting.
Amy, where are you?
Slightly sunny Swansea.
And Jenny?
Very sunny Bristol, just over the bridge.
And Sue?
Very sunny, beautiful Hertford.
Okay.
And this afternoon in Edmonton.
Well, this programme is brought to you by the Maternity Midwifery Forum and by MATFLIX, which is maternity experts streamed online. And people have been looking at quite a bit of that today. We've been doing some of it with our partners at All for Maternity and the Practicing Midwife. We've had an absolutely fantastic day with, starting off with Roy Lilly, who took us through his concerns, his enthusiasms for technology. As you know, he's quite a prominent blogger and health commentator. We then had Jess Phillips, MP, doing a session on domestic violence, and she described midwives as potentially the silver bullet. And we had Anita Byrne from Ireland, whose research indicates that 30% of domestic violence quite often starts around pregnancy and childbirth. And that was not a statistic that I'd heard before, and it seems to be standing up quite strongly. Sue Macdonald, who curates the Maternity Midwifery Festivals, has been keeping wicket for me all through the day and joining in to make sure I don't drop too many balls. We've had a fantastic video from Jackie Dunkley-Bent with our message, and a big sing-song around from an interesting group of midwives. Leslie Page and Sue Down took us through some of the leadership issues that people have been facing, and we played the videos from Fran McConville from the World Health Organization and Neil Shah from Harvard. And I do highlight those two. Fran McConville's work at the WHO has been absolutely central in helping create the momentum for the changes in attitude that are taking place worldwide to put midwifery at the center of the solutions to improving healthcare and primary care. And of course, Neil Shah, working at Harvard, has the rather devastating line from his research that an American woman is now 50% more likely to die in childbirth than her mother, and showed a number of the trends of interventions, particularly around C-sections, that are producing higher rates of mortality and probably quite a lot of morbidity as well. And we've just heard from, in a video from Abigail Holmes, about incontinence and stress. And as she said, you know, people like to see that they've reduced the mortality levels, but when you look at the morbidity levels going up from some of the experiences that women are having. Let's just look at let's start up with some of the issues that came up this morning. Let's start off with heroism. A number of people, Leslie and others, paid tribute to the heroism and the courage of midwives that are going in, overcoming their fear, but also making the point that you can't run a service on heroism without burning it out. Judy, just tell us a little bit about your experience, because you've actually been living in accommodation to be near to the place where you're working.
Well, I have, and that was the only way I could have actually worked. I felt that I needed to help my colleagues, because as soon as this pandemic broke, there about 30 of them went off sick with normal sickness and with self-isolation. But the trust were very good. They got me accommodation. I worked a block of shifts, and which I'll do again next week. But it was interesting because the nurse next door to me, she was a staff nurse in ambulatory care. And the reason she was there was because she would probably be redeployed, which is what they're doing to a lot of nurses in all trusts, to COVID care. She lived on a boat. She had a 4-year-old and a partner was a severe asthmatic. So that's why she was there. And she's just one of many up and down the UK. And I was sort of thinking to myself, when will this girl ever see a family, But the staff there, and I'm sure the same everywhere, they're so committed. They want to do the job. They want to support one another. So it's been a humbling experience, Neil, I have to say. And I'm so glad that I did it.
But Sue, we've heard from people on the midwifery and maternity hour that they can't keep this up. There has to be some return to normal. What's your reflections on the kind of effort that Judy and others are making?
I think it is very humbling actually to see midwives just getting on with it. And I was talking to some midwives today, and they're saying they were really tired, and that the first few weeks was in a way is okay because it was you had the adrenaline and the kind of there was a lot in the media. It was very exciting in the sun, not necessarily in a good way, but it sort of kept that momentum going. But now the sheer time is getting to people and they're getting tired. So people are needing a little bit of a break. They need all the sort of system support and the people like Judy kind of providing that extra support for people just to talk about how they're feeling and kind of look after them and recognize that the saying is, it's okay not to be okay, rather than think you have to carry on and be brave and heroic, that you can just take it easy and let somebody else look after you for a bit and then go back refreshed. I mean, midwives are just fantastically resilient, and that's what's fantastic, but we can't take it for granted. We have to look after our midwives.
You're so right, Sue, because they are looking so tired, because there is a stress, isn't there, of, your family and juggling your homeschooling and your childcare. But that's what I've noticed. And of course, a lot of them are picking up extra shifts because of sickness levels.
Yeah.
But there are processes in place. The occupational health is really excellent.
Now, a couple of Roy Lilly referred to the importance of keeping better births going, and although the chief midwifery officer and others have had to pause some of the transformation programs, we did hear from Karen in South Wales that actually they have managed to keep a lot of the continuity of care going. Sue and I heard that as well on some of the maternity and midwifery hours, and it's working on both sides, both with the mothers stepping up, but also with the midwives stepping up. This issue of protecting the momentum of change and the lessons that were in place. Dianne, how important do you think that is, keeping where we were, if you like, on the 1st of January at the start of the International Year of the Nurse and the Midwife, with policies behind a lot of the changes, the science and the evidence? How important do you think it will be, and how can the ideas in Better Births and others that have been followed through, be rebuilt, build back better, said Mary Renfrew earlier today? How can they do that?
I think it's about being honest and open, and certainly where I work, the Trust has been very open and honest. They have got a very good website that they're informing women where we are and why we've changed things, and knowing that we will get to the end of this. I think what Judy was saying about how tired the midwives are. I mean, I have great admiration for all midwives and my colleagues who are doing sterling jobs, and those who were taken out of some of those projects have just stepped up and stepped around to try and support each other, but keeping everybody in touch and helping them understand that, you know, when we get through this, we will pick up and we will move forward. And I think it's been said a lot during the course of the day that some of the changes that happened, and happened so quickly, things that would have taken months usually, and numerous committees and papers and everything else, have just literally happened because they needed to happen. So I think there's real positivity in a lot of places about how we can go back and actually move things forward. But it's going to be a different pace in every place, because it depends where you were before, you know, COVID really hit home.
Wants to come in on this issue of technology. Roy Lilly it's been raised several times during the day about how programs that have been in the pipeline for 2 years have suddenly been accepted within 2 weeks. And consultations and online discussions. And in fact, in one of the presentations, Amy, they were reporting that success on breastfeeding was going up because the use of online technology meant that instead of perhaps seeing a mother once a day, they were able to make 2 or 3 points of contact for motivation and encouragement. Amy, what feedback are you getting on breastfeeding? Because some of the anecdotes have been a bit mixed.
Yeah, I would say mixed is probably the right word. We've had some stories of women feeling that they don't really get on with face-to-face support, that they prefer someone to be there physically showing them, you know, how to latch a baby on. But on the other side of that, we're seeing some really, really positive stories. I mean, the thing about self-isolation as well is it is almost like that 6 weeks rest after having a baby, that you go home, and as long as you've got a good family situation at home, then you've got the time to rest and be with your baby and just focus on feeding, because where else are you going to go? Your partner's probably home, so as long as your partner is there and you've got a good relationship with them, then they're there to help as well. And put it this way, visitors that you might not have wanted to come can't come. So if you have, say, very interfering family members, well, they can only interfere from a distance. So there are all kind of those positives to it. Some mums as well were saying that on the wards after having their baby, if they were there for a little while, there was quite a sense of togetherness amongst other mums kind of supporting each other. And I think it's really positive that we look to these positive things that have come out of it and not just some of the more difficult stories.
I mean, Mary Renfrew was referring to other cultures, thinking of India and other places where they have the tradition of 40 days afterwards, where the family surrounds the new mother and takes over those responsibilities and keeps the annoying relatives away. And that there are lessons to be learned in that in our sort of frantic, high female employment society. Do you think, I mean, they are tracking some of the statistics, and we will get some lessons out of the end of this, but probably not until next year. What are you seeing online, Amy? Are you following what the different blog groups are saying?
Yeah, and again, it is kind of a mixed bag of what's coming out. We're hoping to launch some research quite soon, just trying to capture some of women's feeding experiences at this time. Midwives some midwives anyway, are anecdotally saying that they're seeing more babies who are back to birth weight much quicker because the parents are sat at home, mum's feeding the baby, mum's holding the baby more, they're feeding, they're getting more milk coming in quicker. We're also seeing on the one hand, more mums actually wanting to breastfeed because that hopefully the breast milk can help protect the baby. But then we're also seeing the other side where sort of misconceptions are getting discussed around the internet, you know, that breast milk might be dangerous or you should give your baby formula just in case, which just aren't true. We have no evidence so far of this actually going into women's breast milk. In previous sort of similar related outbreaks, there was no evidence of it going into breast milk then either. And even if it did, there's no evidence of it kind of affecting the baby in any way. So it's just, again, we're trying to promote the positive messages around social media rather than the opportunists who are maybe there trying to spread negative information. And we're also seeing quite a lot of opportunity taking, shall we say, from the formula industry to set themselves up as breastfeeding experts at this time, which is quite problematic, as you might imagine. So yeah, there's good advice there. Women are getting good information, generally happy, as long as they're staying away from some of the misconceptions. Yeah.
Sue, do you want to come in on that?
Well, I think it was when Amy used the word social, and it was in context of media, but I know that when Abby Holmes was talking at one of the maternity midwifery hours, she was talking about some of the changes, which I don't know if you catch in research, but some of the changes that she's seeing in the unit, because there are no partners coming in as visitors, women are not closing their curtains around themselves, and they're actually talking to each other and making friends, which us old midwives will remember this from our student days and our early midwife days, where you didn't have that many visitors. Therefore, women just talked to each other and got information from each other and support from each other. And I'm not sure if that will be captured, but it's something quite important. I mean, the negative side sometimes is, I did hear some midwives saying, "Oh, it's so nice not to have all these visitors in the postnatal ward." Well, I mean, some women will be feeling lonely, but you know, it swings and roundabouts, I guess.
That's something we're very much trying to measure in the research we want to do, to try and capture that, because that's something we've been seeing from mums as well. Just asking them about what the experience of not being able to have so many visitors is having for them. And as you say, for some, it will be a really negative effect if they're really emotionally needing people. But for others, I can just imagine it's such a relief.
Okay, we heard Sue again in today and in the midwifery hours. We've heard about what was happening on home birth. So the initial retrenchment in hospitals when they were being reconfigured for COVID-19. And lots of places recognised that the maternity units made very tidy, secure areas with ventilators and other high-tech facilities. So some maternity services getting squeezed out, but home birth services being stopped, probably because of self-distancing. Some about arguments about ambulances and things, but we have heard that quite a number of them, you know, nobody's been waiting for the Prime Minister to tell them that the lockdown's finished. They've been pushing back and starting services. What are you picking up, Sue, on that?
I think it's the heads of midwifery, and I think where you've got a good leader who's very committed to home birth and different models of care, they're looking very creatively and trying to find out what answers there are. Like, I mean, again, Abby in Wales, and also Sarah Noble in Warwickshire, actually went and looked at what was needed to support home births. And Sarah went and negotiated a proper ambulance kind of protocol, so that all these discussions about, well, you can't have home birth because we can't have an ambulance service, was kind of washed away. So their home birth rate has gone right up. But in addition, she made sure that her colleagues were getting in-service training and support. So if they hadn't done home birth for a long time, and some midwives haven't, they had that support to develop their skills and their confidence. And that's had an enormous effect. And what hits me time and time again over the last few weeks is the togetherness. I think actually that's the term that Roy Lilly uses, but it's the sort of interprofessional and inter-midwife closeness and support. It's almost intangible, but it's very strong at the moment. It's really lovely, because even though it's hard and stressful, people are together.
And besides, Dianne, besides home births, of course, the other facilities and services were affected have been in water births, as the number of rooms and facilities have been reduced. I think one person said that they'd had 5 pools reduced to 1 because the facilities were taken over for COVID. What kind of trends have you been seeing in water births, both demand and provision?
I think if you look at demands, you do need to look at the different facilities. So certainly hospitals definitely seem to be being more challenged about being able to provide the services, because as you rightly say, the facilities are often taken for either normal physiological births just because things have moved around. As I said earlier, the birth centres are reopening, and many of them did just carry on doing their water births within the safety mechanisms that they'd put in, PPE being, I suppose, the biggest problem. Home births, I think, will go through. It's trying to capture that data, and certainly a lot of the pool companies I know are actually sort of almost asking the question, is this something that you've changed your plans on the back of COVID, so that hopefully through that communication we can find out what's been going on. I think even though, as I said earlier, the Royal College of Midwives are saying 74% of heads of midwifery said that they have maintained a water birth service, sadly, that's not what's coming through from emails that I'm getting. So the service might be there, a bit like Sue said about home births and midwives feeling skilled, maybe haven't done a water birth for a long time or ever at all. So it's all well and good saying the service is there, but if midwives don't feel confident, then it's a real challenge for them. And I do have concerns about the free birthing, but I know it's going on. I know it is. I think we're all fairly, reasonably mature to know that this has always gone on. But how we capture what was truly if there is such a thing, a planned free birth, I think is going to be very challenging to us all. And women do have that legal choice in this country. It's about us providing the right information so that they can make that informed choice. But women are still very frightened about coming in to a facility, whether it's a hospital and even some of the birth centres.
Jenny,
can I add to that? Sorry,
yeah,
can I just add to that? Because I think that's absolutely key to this, is actually what women's choice is around this as well. And hopefully this is going to be something that's going to be captured in relation to everything, is actually what women made the decisions to do themselves in this process. And it's all very well saying, right, we've stopped a home birth service, so if women really want to have a home birth, then they'll find a way.
Yeah.
And it's actually how it's very different across different places in the country as well.
Yeah.
And that's what we've also got to kind of pick up from in all of these pieces of research that are going to take place, and picking up on some of the positive things, most of the positive things, hopefully, that have taken place, but actually how it has been different in different places in the country, and how the responses have been different in different trusts, with, as Sue has said, with different managers, and the importance of actually how we can try and get some sense of equality around that for everybody. That's really what I just wanted to say.
Right. I mean, one of the things that's come out of lots of the presentations has been not just how social media and things have been working with mothers and midwives in the front line, if you can use that term, but the heads of midwifery have their own networks, and Leslie Page and Mary Renfrew and others were saying that the professors from day one have been working on being able to track the data. And Amy, you were mentioning your own sort of work about looking at breastfeeding, but it does look as though there are lots of different levels in maternity midwifery that are taking a strategic approach. They haven't been frozen by the fact that there's a crisis. They are monitoring it, and they are having their own discussions, and they are prepared to push back against the centre. So it's been interesting watching how midwifery leadership has been behaving collectively in a way that perhaps they might not have been able in the past. Is that an impression that people have had, that it's more cohesive and that it is talking to one another as well as just taking commands from the centre? I mean, who can remember the last big sort of crisis, looking across at a few faces that might. But I mean, the leadership in nursing and midwifery has often been very fragmented in the face of previous challenges. But my impression is,
I'll answer that, because I think also we've got to remember that it's not just midwives involved with this, but it is actually the cohesion that is between the midwives and our medical colleagues, and across, as have already been mentioned, the ambulance service, the Royal College of, I've gone out of my head, but with Children's Health, isn't it, Amy? That actually there has been a concerted effort of everybody working together in this. And this is what's been really impressive. And I hope that that's something that is going to be maintained for the well-being of women and babies in the future. You know, that actually this cohesion, it is about midwives who have picked up the ball and run with it, which is fantastic. But actually to keep that going would be fantastic.
I mean, just to go on to the issue of midwifery education, Mary Renfrew made the point that actually the transformation and the turnaround in midwifery, virtually to moving all the courses online, was done within a week, and the regulations were changed, and it was very fast. And I must say, much faster than I'm hearing about complaints in other parts of the universities about moving online, and complaints from hearing from my science student son about the service that he's getting. But it does sound like maternity midwifery schools acted very quickly and were able to go online quite quickly. Is that the kind of feedback that people are getting?
Yeah.
Do you think Mary's right, Sue?
I think she's right. I think universities like a little bit more online because it frees up teachers for more academic work as well as anything else. But I'm aware that from colleagues who are in education, the move to sort of, you know, teachers had to not be there and therefore be available on Zoom meetings or Skype, or there's another one that they use to meet students, and either as groups or individuals. So that's been set up, and I think it was sort of starting in some universities more than others early. There are some that are more ahead, and Jenny will know as much on that one. But it's getting material. So I'm aware at the moment there's a lot of videoing of lectures and writing of kind of materials to help students, those who are still in theory. But I think I have to say, as a teacher, I think midwife teachers are very innovative and they can move fast if they have to do something like this, and they have done. So
Jenny, is that your impression from networks?
I think what Sue said is absolutely right. I think it is different across all of the universities, because some universities were much more down the line of blended learning, which is what we're talking about, perhaps more than truly just online stuff, than other universities were. And so in some places, I do think some people have really struggled, but they have done it very quickly, because I think midwife educators are creative and innovative, and they can pick up the ball and run, and have done for many years, because they always have been like that. But it has been a struggle for some people, from what I've been hearing, that it has not been as easy. And I think it's also the understanding that blended learning is not just about sticking a lecture online and hoping the students are going to respond to it. You have to adapt what you're doing in order to actually work through Zoom or work through different formats in order to enable the students to respond and to learn from it. But we also have to remember that the majority of the students are much more IT savvy than quite a lot of the educators who are out there. And so actually we learn from them, and they can pick up and run with it a lot quicker than we can.
So now, of course, just as a lot of people were called back onto the register and were put on standby to help in the event of a much worse crisis, a lot of students were due to step up. Do we have any impression about how many of them have actually been called back into the service, other than those that were nurses who might have gone back into doing nurses beforehand? Because again,
I don't know what you mean by being called back, Neil. Because
I mean, where the third years were going to go into the service and and then their education will be adjusted to 80%, 30%. But I've seen some comments from students, and I think Alicia was mentioning it in one of the midwifery hours, that that some of them still haven't. That's what they've been prepared for and expecting, but they've not been used in that way yet, even though their courses have gone online. Because in the same way as today, the Nightingale Hospital in London has no patients in it at the moment, and a number of the others are on standby as we go past the first peak. Has that side of it not really been activated other than the courses online?
I think there was a time lag, Neil, from that particular, because I think it was a student that was asked a question on that maternity midwifery hour, and I think there was obviously a time lag between the student signifying that she'd be happy to do this to actually some action being taken. I think well, I don't exactly know how many. I don't think anyone knows exactly how many students have taken it up. There's a proportion that have, and then there's a proportion that haven't been able to because they're shielding or they've got health issues themselves. So, and I guess it's a bit like all these volunteers. Maybe that there's not as much need, especially as the sickness level from the midwives has seems to have reduced a bit. I think initially there was a flurry of illness, and so there was probably a perception of people being short-staffed, and I think that might be settling down, but others might have different perceptions.
Yeah.
Well, only this week, third-year students from Anglia Ruskin have gone into trust, and they're calling it a 6-month placement, and they paid at band 4. So that's quite new. I know the second years are not going in at all, and everything is pretty much online with tutors doing lots of online stuff and delaying assessments. But I think that's pretty much the case everywhere, delayed assessments. I found it very interesting as for signing up. You know, the NMC came out with the notes, because I have 2 colleagues, and also myself, I signed up for, you know, helping out. I've still not heard anything. Another colleague went on the temporary register, has not heard anything. And another colleague who is sort of semi-retired, works on the bank in sexual health, but that's all been pulled. She's made inquiries and has got absolutely nowhere with that, and rang local hospitals herself, can I do something for you? And that's drawn a blank, and I found that really quite interesting. But we had an NMC circular again today, didn't we, to say, you know, thank you for applying, and happy International Day of the Midwife. So I don't know where that's all going to go. I don't know what anybody else thinks, particularly with the setting up of the Nightingale hospitals up and down the country that are not being utilised.
Well, if you look at the way in which sort of this emergency planning is done, and the fear of a second peak, or even just for a long, flat, high level of high dependency, I think the next stage is undoubtedly to try and restore the main hospitals to their full functions for cancer, stroke, cardiac, and all the other treatments that have been postponed. And that perhaps if there is a further peak, and some of these peaks might be regional, so it might be Wales, it might be, at the moment, there's a bit of a peak in the northwest, it's worse. And you could see these hospitals are not being dismantled, they're likely to be mothballed. And it just reminds me of things like the isolation hospitals, tuberculosis and others, that, and in the military analogy, you cannot keep people on the front line for more than 6 weeks without burning them out. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some military analogies that people are withdrawn from these areas, go back into, either take some time off, like 2 weeks, and then go back into mainstream hospital work. And then they might, if there is a second peak, be called up into front line again. but more of that front line might be in some of these nightingale hospitals to minimise disruption in the mainstream hospitals. So it's still very unclear. I think they're taking the precautionary principle of making sure they've got as much of everything as they could possibly need after the next sort of 6 weeks that we go through. What other things have struck you that we've not covered from what you've heard today about the impact of the virus, or the strength and resilience in midwifery? One question which might be direct to Amy: are there any signs that trends in the attitudes of mothers are changing? We heard a little bit about the increase in the number of home births, but it's only from 1 or 2% to 6%. There any, and we talked about breastfeeding, any signs of changes in attitudes amongst pregnant women and their views or their self-image, their perception? Because obviously what happens in maternity is part of a conversation between midwifery and pregnant women. In
terms of their attitudes to feeding their babies, or
not just feeding their babies, if you've more broadly about their attitudes about lifestyle, but all around pregnancy and motherhood, or is it just too early?
I think it's too early to have any hard data. Anecdotally, we are seeing, just from conversations I'm seeing happening online a lot of the time. So we're seeing increased preference to want to give their baby breast milk, deciding to carry on breastfeeding for longer. I think when we get some more data out, because it's very preliminary at the moment, showing that women who have had COVID are having antibodies in their milk, that will be a phenomenal step, I think, in just kind of realizing how important breastfeeding can be. So we're seeing that. I think more broadly, I'm just picking up across health behaviors that this has been quite a wake-up call to a number of people, just more broadly in terms of their health. So we're seeing a lot more sort of trend to try and be a bit healthier, and that's not just in relation to pregnant and new mothers. I think it's a kind of a real wake up for some people, because a lot of people in their lives will not have had any sort of wider health scare like we've had. A lot of us, particularly of certain generations, there just hasn't been a major health thing. We're used to vaccinations, we're used to all of this. So I think changes there kind of are coming about. But certainly with the breastfeeding, we're seeing it. The other thing was, I've been told that we're seeing an increase in demand for donor milk for babies as well. So more people are starting to inquire that, if they have a very sick or premature baby in hospitals, whether they can have donor milk for their baby rather than necessarily giving formula. So it is one of those things that I think will really change things longer term. And I think that's something we have to really think about in terms of our response to COVID, and kind of understanding how people's beliefs and behaviours are being affected.
Okay, let's go around the table in the last sort of 5 minutes and just ask you to say what's the best thing you've seen happen that's made you happiest during this, and what is the one change that you would like to see baked in after COVID is open? So what's made you the happiest? I mean, from my point of view, I enjoyed Sarah's story from South Warwickshire about negotiating with the ambulance service. She'd done a bit of time in the military, and I have to say it showed. She took them on, she expressed it in their terms. She went and worked through all the problems instead of protesting about it, and found a solution. And the thing I hope will stick after this, and I've probably stolen everybody else's preferences, is the online consultations, that they won't either be shot down by the data controllers and the panic-stricken trust lawyers, and that interaction will become part of what Jenny called in education the blended mix. So who would like to go next? What's the best that you've heard during this, and what's your long-term hope? Dianne, go on, what's the thing that cheered you up the most?
Okay, I think probably for me, the interaction with other health professionals and birth attenders, birth carers. I've worked a lot more with people like doulas and maternity voices partnerships, and groups who support women who are vulnerable either because of some disability or because of their backgrounds. We haven't mentioned a lot about women from other ethnic backgrounds, but certainly for me, that's really shone through in the last few weeks. Far more interactions from women directly and from their support groups, and that's got to be of benefit to all women. We all know from the studies that women from ethnic backgrounds have a much higher risk of morbidity and sadly mortality. So for me, I guess that's got to be a real positive to move forward and to be less insular in the NHS and look outside the box.
Okay. Jenny, what's been your highlight? What would you like to see baked in for the future?
I've been very encouraged by the way that the professors of midwifery have come together. I know that they worked together anyway and have been discussing things previous to this, but actually the way that they have worked so fast in order to look at the evidence in order to actually enable practice has been fantastic. And this is not just in this country, but also in what's going on in the world globally. Yeah. The connections that are being built up between everybody to actually produce the right evidence in order to actually help everybody has been wonderful.
Yeah.
Judy, you've been out there getting your hands on the action. What's been your highlight and what would you like to see baked in for the future? Judy, have we lost you?
Sorry, I was just having a micro nod. I was just thinking, what's already been said. I do agree with Jenny and Dianne, and working together has been absolutely fantastic. And if I can just say a word about the security people in these hospitals, they work 12-hour shifts. They're looking after everybody. They're so pleasant and just absolutely unbelievable. But certainly where I am, the management set up a Facebook group to be a resource, a contact and a support. Now, I've been really quite surprised how well that's been used. And that takes me to Roy Lilly, where I came in. I love that man. You're quite right how we're having to embrace the online, because for me, 40 years or whatever down the line, it's not easy, but he did make a good point there. But can I just say, Roy, can you get some money for these trusts, because they need decent printers, decent PCs, and then maybe they'll crack it, But it's just working together, and it's a bit like, well, we've got VE Day, haven't we, on Friday? It just reminds me of that. We just need Vera in here to sing. And don't you love Tom? And Tom's from Yorkshire.
Oh, yeah.
Amy, Amy, what's been your highlight, and what would you like to see baked in for the future?
I think really reflecting on what everybody else has really said, in terms of just the speed of how quickly people have come together. And it's like they've forgotten about any of the differences they might usually be having, or their own personal preferences or arguments, and they've just really, really come together to do things really quickly. And we're seeing so many people get stuff online, working together to do it, and volunteering their time where possible, and just being so generous with that. Everybody's just suddenly got this shared goal that they want to make things better, and it's like some of the negatives have all fallen away. I mean, you just have to look at how rapidly you've been putting these seminars on, just so quickly, just we're doing it. The universities, we had a few days notice of you're suddenly going to have to go online. It's like, all right, and everybody just pulled together and did it. Nobody had, complained about it. We just did it. And just the same across sort of doulas and midwives and health visitors and breastfeeding counsellors. Everybody is just working together and it's lovely. And I just wish we could carry on like this and never have any arguments again.
Well, Sue has followed us all the way through that race and been my sort of pillar in getting things online for the maternity and midwifery hours and for this today. Sue, what's been your highlight, obviously, other than working with me? And what would you like to bake in for the future, never having to work with me again?
There's too many highlights, and I think everyone said such good stuff. It makes me think I should have said that. I'm going to do 4 relevant facts, and those older midwives will know about this. This is what we passed our exam with years and years ago. You had to sum up in a few words. And I think, for me, the highlight over this day actually has been the celebration, the keeping of the good stuff like togetherness, and I've scribbled togetherness all over the place because that's really important for us to do. Valuing the strengths of midwives with that togetherness and with working with others, and using innovation and evidence and technology better, but keeping that very human touch, human relationship, smiley eyes. And also, I think from Leslie Page, that the sort of darker or more sad bit is poverty. She reminded us that we're liable to have a recession coming along, which when you're talking about billions coming here and being spent here and there and everywhere, someone's going to have to pay for this.
Yeah.
And we need to be aware of the effects long-term of poverty on some of the women and families we're going to be looking after. So that's the kind of, but with the kind of good stuff and the togetherness, we can achieve huge things, and maybe we can actually destroy poverty, which would be fantastic.
That was certainly Leslie Page's call for to be aware of political action, be aware of inequality, and these are the things. So can I thank everybody, Dianne, Amy, Jenny, Sue for supporting us all through the day, Judy, and say to everybody who's watching, this has been the Maternity and Midwifery Forum's celebration of International Day of the Midwife. We hope that you've enjoyed it. It's been brought to you by MATFLIX, the video streaming service from Maternity Experts, where you can see quite a few of these characters on it. And we'll be back tomorrow evening with the Maternity and Midwifery hour with Sue at 7 o'clock. People can join in. That will be streamed on Facebook, and every Wednesday after that. The archive is free and open for people to use, but if you need the subscription service to make sure you're getting materials properly curated by the wonderful Dr. Jenny Hall, to make sure that you've got some coherence and stuff that you can use for your revalidation and for your own personal development. So thank you to everybody. We're going to be streaming a number of videos through the evening and finishing with the one that's had the most coverage of our system, which was David Monteith's piece on stillbirth, which is one of those that crosses the boundaries between professional and personal experience. But thanks to everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow night at the Maternity and Midwifery Noon. My name's Neil Stewart, and I'm the Editorial Director of the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. And good evening. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.